Here we are back in our box room for another episode of some basics for Hammer++ in Source. In this one we're going to cover some more selection things, we're going to cover some new tools, and then we're going to cover some ways of keeping organized while you're working. So to start with, the 3D Gizmo that we've looked at before actually has some extra hotkeys that I would like to show you. So let me place down a barrel real quick. So Shift E to make an entity, Alt Enter to open its properties, and then I'll browse for drum because I know that the barrels are called oil drums, and then I'll pop that down. So if I open the selection tool with Shift S, I can then cycle through using X to get my 3D Gizmo, and then I can use the hotkeys G, R and E to grab, rotate and scale. I'm not sure why scale is on E, but there we go. If I press G, I'll get screen space translation. I can then press X, Y or Z individually to lock it to an axis, or I can lock it to a plane as well. So I pressed X once currently. If I press Z now, I will get the XZ plane, and then if I say wanted the XY plane instead of the XZ plane, I'd press Z again and then Y, and that would swap it to the XY plane. And then if I want to get back to purely screen space, I'd need to use Y and then X twice, and that will get me back to purely screen space. If I press R, I will get screen space rotation, and then similarly I can press X, Y or Z to do rotation on those axes. The last one will need a brush to show you because it is for scale and you cannot scale props. So if I select a brush and press E, I'll get a screen space scaling effect, which I will admit I don't quite understand. I never really use this, but you can lock it to an axis, which makes it slightly easy to understand. If I press Z, it'll lock to purely vertical scaling, and I can scale the brush vertically. You will notice that for all of these manipulation methods, be they screen space or in the 2D views, they all work on the grid. You can use the square brackets to change the grid size, which will affect how much it's snapping on the grid, or if you want to use no grid at all when you're moving, you hold down Alt whilst you're moving something, and you can move it without any grid snapping at all. If you end up with something that's off grid and you need it to be on grid again, you can use Control B and that will snap it back onto the grid for you. Because the rotation in Hammer defaults to 15 degrees, you'll notice that's quite a big snap, and for placing many props you'll want rotations way under 50 degrees. You can just hold Alt and it will change it to half-degree increments, so you can get almost any angle that you need that way. Since a lot of Team Fortress maps will rely on symmetry, it's fairly common that you want to mirror something, so I've just whipped up a quick asymmetrical brush here to show you that there's 3 main ways that you can mirror something. The first, which I don't use too much because I can never remember which way around it goes, you can use Control L and Control I for flipping horizontally and flipping vertically. The next that I do use quite a lot is simply to use the transform handles in a 2D view. I'm going to flip this horizontally, and I can see that at the top it's 96 units. So I'm going to grab the side handle and drag it all the way across itself until the top says 96 units and it's facing the other direction. The last method has a few other uses as well. So with the selection, press Control M, and that will get you this little transform window, which is incredibly useful because you can put in exact values for a rotation, a scale, or a movement, and if you use the bottom teleport option, that will actually put that object at those specific coordinates rather than moving it on an offset. If you want to mirror something though, you can use scale and say I want to flip this in X again so that it's back in its original position. I'm just going to put in -1 there. Normally for a scale you would want to put in 1 into your other axes so it doesn't flatten it, but Hammer is actually smart enough to know that leaving these blank means you don't want any change. So -1, 0 and 0 will do, and I'll just click OK, and it's been mirrored across itself. Next, I'll introduce 2 tools that are closely linked, the Vertex Tool and the Polygon Tool. So far, the only way I've shown you to make non-cuboid brushes is by using the clipping tool and slicing parts of it off, but using the Vertex tool we can move the vertices of a brush directly, as well as merging or adding new ones entirely, and using the Polygon tool we can create a brush that isn't square anyway. To illustrate each, I'll round the corners of this doorway. First, with the Polygon tool, I'll zoom in on my 2D view to find where our doorway is, so I know that this is the top one, so I've got this corner here that I'm going to do. I'll use this one up here, the Polygon Tool, or Shift and N to enter the Polygon Tool, and then I will click 3 times. So I'm going to start at the center, I'm going to go to the corner, and then come down. And now I've clicked 3 times, you can see that it's automatically filled in this third line that closes from the most recent vertex to the first vertex, forming a closed polygon. So I could continue clicking more to get more edges, but 3 is okay for this instance. But you will also notice that in some places the line to the cursor is red and in some places it's yellow. So in the red areas, if I were to click here, it would create an invalid brush, but in the yellow areas that would create a valid shape, and so it will let me. But since I've got my 3, I'm just going to press enter and it will create that brush. Now this brush appeared perfectly in the doorway here because the most recent thing that I had selected before creating this one was another part of this wall. Now the Polygon tool only works in one 2D view. It's not like a regular brush tool where you get to manipulate in all 3 2D viewports before you finalize it. You only get the one, which means it has to fill in the blanks for the other axes. So it will do its best guess based on whatever you had selected. So if I zoom out and say select this brush here, which is much deeper, and then go make another polygon over here that has that many faces, you can see the shape of it matches the previous brush that I had selected. Since brushes have to be concave, if I want the other corner to be smoother, I'll have to construct it out of several brushes. So using the Polygon tool, I can create several brushes at once. All I have to do is press enter between them. There we go, and we'll create that last one up there. Now I have a slightly smoother corner. Now I'll show you how to make the first side match the second side using the Vertex tool. To swap to the Vertex tool, use this button here or Shift V. When the tool is active, you'll see whichever brush you have selected has these white handles in the corners and the yellow handles at the center point of each edge. If you don't see either one of these types of handles, press Shift V a few more times and it'll cycle through. Unlike other modes where we've cycled through to get different interaction methods, all of these ones are the same, it's just whether they're visible or not. With the Vertex tool, you can select individual vertices on their own to move them, or you can select an entire line which will move both ends of the line. And if you select in the 2D viewport and the vertices line up perfectly, if I click here, you'll see that both of these two line up, so I can move both of them at once. In order to make this match though, I need it to be 3 brushes and not 1, so I will swap over to the clipping tool with Shift X, and I'll make a cut here, and I'll make a cut here. I will delete this one as it is excess. These 3, I'll use the Vertex tool to manipulate them into this shape. This side brush has one face too many, but we can merge them. If I select this one here and move it up to the same position as already exists up here, Hammer will give me this pop-up to merge. If it gives you this pop-up to merge, you probably want to say yes. If I didn't in this circumstance, I would have a face here that has no area at all, and that would be an invalid brush. So I'm going to say yes. Now that one's triangular, but this one's 2 and this one's 3, so I'm going to reselect this one and move it over. I'm going to do exactly the same for this top brush, move over, merge, and then move that up top. And then this one in the corner, we need to remove this little extra bit that's sticking out here. But if I simply move that one up, I now need an extra face in here. But if I click this yellow one and I do Control F, I can create an extra one. See how this one's changed to white and there's now 2 yellow ones between? That's because there's an extra face in there, or rather an extra edge, resulting in 2 extra faces. And then if I move this one down, now it matches the shape perfectly. So the Vertex tool is incredibly powerful for creating non-square brushes. Next, I'll go over some ways in which you can keep yourself organized as you work. Hammer allows for objects to be grouped by pressing Ctrl G with the selection. So if I select, say, these ones here by using Ctrl to multi-select, I can press Ctrl G, and now these are groups, and so I can't select them individually. And let's do that with this one as well. So now I've got 2 groups there. You can also ungroup with Ctrl U, so now I can select them individually again. Or you can use these buttons up here to group selected or ungroup selected. So I'm going to group that again. You don't have to completely destroy the group every time you want to edit something within it. This box up here allows you to change how Hammer deals with selections. Currently groups is highlighted, but we can change it to objects, and now I can select individual objects within this group. And even if I edit them and go back to groups, the group is maintained, but the object within it has been moved. Usually you'll want to keep this in groups or objects modes. Sometimes you might want solids. That's for brush-based entities which can contain multiple brushes but still be just one object. Hammer also has Visgroups. This box here has been empty this whole time, but if we flip over to the auto one, we'll see the Visgroups that it has automatically sorted objects into. So if I zoom out, these are all sky brushes, and you'll notice there's a sky Visgroup. If I turn this off, all of those brushes disappear. Now, you'll want to be careful because any Visgroup that's turned off won't appear in a compile, so if I were to compile this map now, it would leak, which we don't want. But the groups can be powerful for cutting down on clutter while you're working, or hiding certain types of objects in order to debug an issue. This list of automatically generated Visgroups could easily be twice as long for a map nearing completion that has more types of entities in it. There is also a tab for user-generated Visgroups. This can be incredibly helpful for larger complex maps to keep yourself organized. You can add objects to a Visgroup by making a selection and then using this red hashed box for new Visgroup. You can either place it into an existing Visgroup if you have one ready to go, or you can create a new one here, which I will do. I don't want to hide it, so I'll just leave that unchecked and click OK. And now we have Right Rock here. And if I did want to hide it, I could just toggle that off and then it wouldn't appear in the compile. There is another way to create Visgroups, so I'll do the same for the left rock in a different way. So if I press Alt and Enter to open its properties, you'll notice this last tab here is also Visgroup. And in here, we have the list of Visgroups. If I click Edit Groups and then New Group, I can rename the new group to Left Rock and then assign it to the left rock. And now I have Left Rock and I have Right Rock. You can combine Visgroups by dragging one onto the other, and if you want to nest Visgroups, you can drag with the right mouse button. That will let you put one underneath the other. The last tab here is the Cordon tab, and truth be told, I've never had more than 2 Cordon boxes active at once, so I've never really needed a tab to keep them organized. However, the idea of a cordon is incredibly useful, so I will tell you about it. A cordon box will limit the area of a map that is both visible in Hammer, as well as limiting what is compiled. To set one up, you'll need to press this button up here to edit the cordon bounds. And the first time, when you don't have one active at all, you'll just need to drag out an area in the 2D views exactly the same as if you were creating a brush from scratch. Once you have your area defined, press the next button over the toggle cordon state to turn it on. If your box overlapped your level like I did, you'll notice that some of your stuff will have disappeared. If I zoom out, you can see that everything outside this red box has disappeared, and it won't appear in the final compile. It'll only have what's inside the red box. Now you might think this has just created a big hole in the map and it'll leak, but the cordon walls, the walls of this red box actually act like sort of an infinitely thick wall, so nothing will leak from a map that's got a cordon bound active. I think the best way to show you what it's doing is to slice the level in 2. So if I change this cordon bound to be something like that, we should now have an area of skybox texture in both sides of our map, and we won't see the rock props at all because they're outside the cordon bounds. So if I run a compile now,
a few moments later.
Now with the map compiled, you can see exactly where the cordon bound intersected these brushes, because there is no more brush beyond this point. Despite the fact that that brush does extend in Hammer, it's been sliced by the cordon bound. And we can't see any of the rock props. In a large map it can take 20 minutes, 30 minutes easily to compile the whole thing, but because a cordon allows you to limit what's compiled, is extremely useful for compiling just a small area of your map to keep that compile time down so that you can work on it in a reasonable fashion. If you have any questions about the topics of this tutorial, pop them into the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. If you'd prefer real-time assistance with any TF2 mapping questions you might have, check out the TF2maps.net Discord server. It's always active and full of very smart people that are ready to help. Stay tuned on this channel for more introductory tutorials just like this, and if you like what I'm doing and would like to support financially, consider buying a few map stamps for either Hoodoo, Mann Manor or Snowplow. The proceeds from map stamps are split directly between only the people that actually made each map. Valve don't take a cut, so they're a great way to support myself or other TF2 mappers directly. Thank you.